The Kings of Clonmel, Chapter 14. "I can't get over the fact that King Ferris is your brother," Horace said. It wasn't the first time he'd said it. Since he and the two rangers had left Redmont and headed for the coast, he kept coming back to the fact, each time with a wondering shake of his head. Usually it happened when there was a lull in the conversation, Will noted. "So you keep saying," Halt said. There was a warning tone in his voice that Will recognized. Horace, however, seemed oblivious to it. "Well, it's a bit of a surprise, Halt. I'd never have thought of you as, being royalty." Halt's baleful gaze turned to focus on the tall, young knight riding beside him. "Oh, really?" he said. "I suppose I'm just so unroyal in my bearing, is that it? Too coarse and common altogether?" Will turned away to hide a smile. Horace seemed to have a real knack for getting under Halt's skin with his attitude of innocence. "Well, no, not at all," Horace said, realizing that he had annoyed the ranger, but not sure how it had happened. "It's just that you don't have the... He hesitated, not quite sure what it was that Halt didn't have. "The haircut," Will put in. Halt's glare swung towards him. The haircut. It was not a question. It was a statement. Will nodded easily. "That's right. Royalty has a certain sense of fashion to it. It has to do with bearing and behavior and, haircuts." "You don't like my haircut?" Halt said. Will spread his hands innocently. "Halt, I love it. It's just that it's a little Rufus the Roughnut for the brother of a king. It's not what I would call—" He paused, leaning across his saddle to study Halt's pepper and salt hair more closely, ignoring the drawn-together brows and the dangerous look in Halt's eyes. Then he found the word he was looking for. "Sleek." Horace had been watching this exchange with interest, grateful that Halt's ill temper had been channeled away from him for the time being. Now, however, he couldn't help buying back in. "Sleek, yeah, that's the word. That's it. Your haircut isn't sleek enough. Royalty is sleek above all other things." "Do you find King Duncan sleek?" Halt asked. Horace nodded emphatically. "When he wishes to be, on state occasions, there's a definite sleekness to the man. Wouldn't you agree, Will?" "Absolutely," the young ranger said. Halt's gaze swiveled back and forth between the two of them. He had a sudden impression of himself as a bull between two dogs as they darted in on alternate sides to nip at his heels. He decided it was time to change the point of attack. "Horace, you remember when we were in Gallica, when we challenged d'Epernon?" Horace nodded. A shadow flitted across his face for a moment at the memory of the evil warlord. "I remember." "Well, I said then that I was related to the royal line of Hibernia. Remember?" "Yes, I seem to recall words to that effect," Horace said. Now it was Halt's turn to spread his hands out in a perplexed gesture. "Well, then, did you think I was lying?" Horace opened his mouth to reply, then shut it. There was a long, uncomfortable pause as the three horses trotted along, the only sound being the irregular clopping of their hooves on the road. Is that a red hawk? Will said, pointing to the sky, in an attempt to change the subject. No, it's not, Holt said, without even bothering to look in the direction Will was pointing. And to hell with it if it is. Well, he said to Horace, you haven't answered me. Did you think I was lying? Horace cleared his throat nervously. Then in a small voice he said, as a matter of fact, yes. Holt drew rein on Abelard, and the small horse stopped. Will and Horace had to conform to his action, turning their horses so that the three of them faced each other in a rough circle in the center of the road. Holt regarded Horace with a hurt expression on his face. You think I was lying? You challenge my basic honesty? I am deeply, deeply hurt. Tell me, Horace, when have I ever lied? Will frowned. Holt was laying it on a little thick, he thought. The indignation, the hurt expression, just didn't ring true somehow. He sensed that his mentor was trying to get the better of Horace in this exchange, working on Horace's basic good nature to make him feel guilty. Well, said Horace uncertainly, and Will thought he saw a small, self-satisfied shift to Holt's shoulders. Then the knight continued. Well, you remember those girls? Girls? What girls? Holt asked. When we first landed in Gallica, there were some girls at the harbor front in rather short dresses. Oh, those. Yes, I think I recall them, Holt said. There was a wariness to his manner now. What girls were these? Will put in. Never mind, Holt snapped out of the corner of his mouth. Well, you said they were couriers, that they had short dresses because they might have to run with urgent messages. Will let out a snort of laughter. You said that? He said to Holt. Holt ignored him. I might have said something along those lines. It's been a while. You said exactly that, Horace told him accusingly, and I believed you. You didn't, Will said incredulously. He felt like a spectator at a boxing match. Horace nodded solemnly. I did, because Holt told me, and Holt is a ranger, and rangers are honorable men. Rangers never lie. Will turned away at that. Now Horace was laying it on a bit thick, he thought. Horace turned accusing eyes on Holt. But you didn't you, Holt? It was a lie, wasn't it? Holt hesitated, then gruffly he replied, It was for your own good. Abruptly he touched his heels to Abelard, and the little horse trotted away, leaving Will and Horace facing each other in the middle of the road. As soon as he felt Holt was out of earshot, Horace allowed a broad grin to spread across his face. I've waited years to get him back for that. He wheeled kicker and turn and headed off at a fast trot after Holt. Will stayed where he was for a few moments, pondering. Horace had always been so guileless, so straightforward and sincere, that he had always made an easy target for practical jokes. Now it seemed he had developed a cunning streak of his own. He's probably been around us too long, he thought, and turned Tug after the other two. Later that night, Wrapped warmly in his blankets, his head pillowed on his saddle, Will looked up at the stars, clear and bright in the night sky, and smiled quietly to himself. He could feel the chill of the night air on his face, but that only served to make the rest of his body under the blankets feel warm and comfortable. It was good to be back on the road, heading for another adventure. It was even better to be doing so in the company of his two closest friends. For an hour or so after the confrontation on the road, Halt had attempted to maintain a haughty pretense of injured pride, but eventually he couldn't keep it up any longer, and with a show of great dignity he announced that he would forgive Horace his transgression. Horace, for his part, had affected to be grateful to the bearded ranger, but he spoiled the effect a little by sneaking a covert wink to Will. Once again, Will realized that Horace these days was not the innocent of old. He would bear watching, Will thought. There was a long history of practical jokes between them that Horace might be looking to redress. As the stars wheeled in the night above them, he found he couldn't sleep, and his thoughts turned to the morning they had left Redmont. Crowley, Sir Rodney, Baron Arald, and all their friends were there to see them off, of course. But Will's memory focused mainly on two of them, Lady Pauline and Alice. Alice had kissed him good-bye and then whispered a few private words in his ear. He smiled now at the memory of them. Then Alice had moved to farewell Horace, who had arrived to join them the previous night, and Will had found himself facing Lady Pauline. She kissed his cheek softly, then leaned forward to hug him. As she did, she said quietly, "Look after him for me, Will. He's not as young as he thinks he is." With a slight shock, he realized she meant Halt. Will could think of no one who needed looking after less than Halt, but he nodded nonetheless. "You know I will, Pauline," he said, and she looked deeply into his eyes for several seconds. "Yes, I do know," she said, and then she moved to embrace her husband and retie the fastenings of his cloak, patting them into place the way wives do for husbands. It was strange, Will thought now. He had been desperately sorry to leave Alice and his other friends at Redmont, and the moment of parting brought an uncomfortable lump to his throat. Yet now that they were on the road again, camped under the stars, enjoying the close-knit bond of true friendship that existed between the three of them, he felt remarkably happy. Life was good, he thought. In fact, life was close to perfect, and he fell asleep with that thought. 2 hours later, Horace shook him awake to take over the watch, and he rolled blearily out of his warm blankets into the cold night. Well, perhaps, he reflected, life wasn't quite so close to perfect at that moment.